What's up? I'm really excited for today's video because I'm gonna be sharing with you the variation that can defeat even experienced 2500 rated opponents in as little as 10 moves. They're gonna be checkmated in one of the most popular chess openings on amateur level, if not the most popular opening here in the two knights game. After white goes bishop c4, knight f6, and lots of your opponents, in fact majority of them, will go for this attack against your f7 pawn. And what they're hoping for is the fried liver attack, what is known as the fried liver attack. Here after we play d5 to block this diagonal, white captures the pawn, and at this point we're going to surprise your opponent. Now what they do expect from you is the move knight takes d5. That's what they are hoping for, but we aren't going to play this. Because if knight takes d5, just in case you don't know, there is that fried liver attack. Knight takes f7, pull your king off, then followed with queen f3, double attack, and black is going down very quickly. That's what your opponent is hoping for, but we aren't going here. Let's take it back. Instead of this, instead of the losing mistake knight takes d5, the main move is knight going here to a5, which leads to a ton of theory. Many thousands of games will play by that. That's a very complicated line. Instead of all that, we're going to play a bit riskier, but also significantly rewarding line, knight to d4. And at first, it looks like you kind of neglected white's main intent to cause trouble for you on this vulnerable f7 square, because here in this position white can just play pawn d6 and open up this diagonal, renewing the threat, and it looks like there's not much black can do here really, and black's in trouble. But what you're gonna do here is to pretend like you either overlooked the threat or you didn't come up with a solution anyway and just took the pawn. Now, guess which move is the most popular, the most played move here, even by strong players? That's the move knight takes f7, forking the queen and rook. At first glance, it looks like black just simply has to resign because they're going to lose the rook for nothing, and that is it. But the actual situation is right the opposite. In fact, black is winning here, although it's certainly not easy to see it if you aren't prepared, and lots of your opponents aren't. In fact, the majority of them. You're playing queen c6, and this little move, this little shift one square to the right, actually causes enormous pressure on white's position somehow. It's really a bit strange even, I would say, but it's just such an effective opening. Now, what's the point? Well, you're attacking in multiple directions. You're attacking this pawn, you're attacking the bishop on c4. The bishop can't easily retreat because it also has to guard the knight on f7, which is also shaking. And, you know, to some extent, there is even this X-ray threat to the pawn on c2, because your knight from d4 is also pressuring it. And just by the sheer volume of arrows, you can see that white is in trouble, because they really cannot parry all of these threats. Anyway, usually they're gonna grab the rook, because why not? That was the intent of their previous move. And then you take this pawn on g2, threatening queen takes h1, which is nearly a checkmate. The only way for white to save the rook is rook to f1, but then queen to e4, check to the king. The only normal way to cover it is bishop e2, and after that, all of a sudden, knight to f3, checkmate in 10. And guess what? Right as I mentioned earlier, 2500 rated players, and of course, weaker level opponents, were checkmated just like that, right in 10 moves in one of the most played openings. Isn't that brilliant? Yes, it is. But of course, we do need to know a couple other options that your opponents can choose from, so let's go over them real quick. Going back a couple moves in this critical 10th position, right after we played queen c6, putting all this pressure against white. Besides knight takes h8, which loses in a spectacular way, as we have seen, queen takes g2, followed by a quick checkmate. If your opponent is experienced enough to notice this threat, then maybe they'll simply castle, saying, okay, at least my king is safe. And that's kind of true, but, you know, now we simply start grabbing material. We're grabbing the bishop. The knight takes our rook, which is, you know, beneficial for white at one hand, but the problem is this knight is locked there. It can't get out, right? It can go here, it's going to be captured by the pawn. Can go here, it will be captured by either king or queen. Therefore, the knight is going to stuck there, and in the vast majority of the cases, you're going to win it sooner or later. You can, you know, castle queenside and capture it somehow. But right now, there are a lot of great options to choose from. For example, knight takes c2 simply wins this rook on a1, because it can't retreat anyway. Strangely enough, the most popular move for white here in this position is knight a3. The move which doesn't really make much sense, because you aren't going to trade your knight here, right? You've got this bishop. So instead, you simply trade off the bishop, and after this exchange, you pick up the rook. This knight is still, you know, in trouble. Basically, you're going to play something like bishop e6, castle queenside, and then your rook will ultimately grab this knight on h8, something like that. I mean, you can even go here like king f8, king g8 and grab it that way. Anyway, the knight isn't going anywhere, and as a result of this line, you're just getting significant material advantage, and that is already completely winning. Alrighty, let's go over this once again, and let's see what else can your opponents play against you. We're still going for the knight f6, the two knights game, attacking this pawn, and usually your opponents will go knight g5. By the way, just a little side note, many of your opponents will also play a symmetric move knight c3, and you may be surprised to know that this is actually an error, and there is a way for black to take advantage of it, and very often to get a winning position. I'll link my video on top about this, because it's just relevant and, you know, so common, probably one of the most common opening errors of white, I mean, of all chess. Alright, anyway, let's come back to our fried liver attack, or at least an attempt to fried liver you. But we aren't taken here, we're going knight e4, white tries to renew the threat here by playing pawn d6, and we are gladly accepting the bait, because now we know that knight f7 fails due to queen moving here to c6 with lots of threats all around. The other question you may have is, what if bishop takes here, f7 instead of the knight? Then we're playing king to e7, and still these pieces are shaky. You want to play h6, drive the knight away, and pick up the bishop. For that reason, the bishop has to go. Now, where will it go? If it goes back to c4, that really fails to the exact same thing. Queen to c6, we already know that stuff. Attacks the bishop, attacks the pawn over here. There's also one funny line here, actually. If white tries playing bishop f1 to kind of defend it that way, then it fails due to this threat against the pawn on c2, so knight takes c2. Check to the king, king e2 is forced, and you can just win the rook, of course, but the funny line would be h6, attacking the knight, and as it goes back, you play queen e4, and that's another neat and really accurate checkmate here right in the middle of the board. It's kind of funny how white goes from one trouble to the other in different sub-variations of this opening. Alright, so bishop c4 loses to queen c6, all the same stuff. What if bishop goes back to b3 to safety? Well, that is indeed much more safe, of course, a lot better option for white, but that still leaves you with a fairly strong attack. White is overall completely underdeveloped, right? Most of the pieces are stuck there in the first rank, and this knight on g5 is more of a liability, because you keep attacking it, it has to go back, you attack it once again, e4, and you can follow up with bishop g4 at some point, hitting the queen, and for that reason white is really uncomfortable here. If knight goes here to h4, you just gotta be careful watching over this potential fork, but that's not a problem at all, because you are going to play king f7 anyway, just to put your king to safety and, you know, open up your bishop. And now, in addition to all the other problems of white, there is also this knight on the ream, which is deme, as we know, and now I want to go g5 and simply capture it, because there is no way for the knight to retreat. So white has to provide the escape path here, but after g5, knight g2, the knight is safe, but we come back to the bishop g4 idea, and suddenly the queen is trapped. It really has no way to go, and we just win the queen. Now, it can't be all that bad for white, right? There must be the solution. And at this point, it's just that this tempting move d6 is actually wrong. There is another move, pawn c3, which is more challenging for black, and you gotta know how to react here. What I suggest you to do is to keep going all out and keep attacking, because, hey, why not? Let's have some fun. And the way to do that is not to retreat, but to counterattack with the move pawn b5. Now, it leads to a very massive position at some point, but don't worry, we are having it under control. Now, white can either retreat with a bishop or recapture your knight. So let's start from this. This leads to lots of takes here and there. You take, now white takes here. Instead of moving this knight, there is a stronger option. Queen takes d5. The queen is getting involved into the game, and as always, it attacks a lot and all around. Therefore, white probably needs to capture here. Now queen takes g5. White keeps capturing, at least this is the most popular option here. Bishop takes g7. And that is also a really remarkable position, because at first, let's say white castles, it may seem like, you know, black's in trouble. Your king is kind of open, your pawns are weak all around, but that's actually not true, and black is just winning here, because your activity is way superior. Here, for example, after bishop b7, the threats that you have here against white's king are extremely strong. There is just no way for white to handle them anyway. And once again, you're having all these open lines and diagonals, and you're just attacking. You also can, bring your rook here on the g-file in the future, and there is not much white can do. Your pawn here on c4 is also kind of restricting white, from moving forward. Oh no, that is completely winning. Although white may think at some point here still that they're having an upper hand, but that's completely the opposite. Okay, anyway, first of all, white needs to stop queen to g2 checkmate, so f3. And in this game, black played bishop d4 check, king h1, castle, queenside, preparing to play rook g8, and just checkmate white over the g-file. White played d3, a little trick. This is a discovered attack, but the queen goes back, so that doesn't really do much. Now after pawn takes, black just play rook g8, creating that threat of queen takes g2. And I mean, black could actually play something like bishop b2 instead, hitting the queen. That's just completely overwhelming for black. I mean, it's overwhelming for white because you have such a strong attack. So after queen e2, black played rook e8, attacking the queen again, trying to force it to move so that we can grab this pawn and win. And after queen to d2, let this be our puzzle of the day. So it is black to play, it's your turn, please think about this, and if you can't find the winning solution, please write it down in the comments below. That was quite a lengthy variation. I definitely don't expect you to memorize it. That's the last thing you need to do about chess openings. But what is useful is just to know the common plans and ideas, and also let's not forget that your opponents aren't Carlsons, they don't know these variations anyway, so you're having a much better preparation here in this opening. Also, it is useful to know, generally speaking, how to find proper attacking moves in any position. If you're wondering how to do that, I've got a free masterclass that covers just that. I'll link it somewhere above and below the video in the description, and there I give you a few simple keys to find attacking moves in any middle game position, so if you're curious, you may check this out. And now let's come to the joy killer, also known as Stockfish, because it really doesn't like chess gambits and usually says that, like, come on bro, if you're going to give up any material, I'm willingly taking it and then I'm converting it to a win. But that's not the case for, an average Joe who's playing chess against you. Anyway, let's see what Stockfish recommends here for white. So here, after white plays c3, attacking your knight, and you're counter-attacking with the pawn b5 move, we just analyze this crazy line where we start capturing everything. But a more prudent option for white is just to drop the bishop back, because the black's problem here, is that this knight is attacked, and if it goes away, we'll win this pawn on b5. Okay? And for that reason, once again, we are not going to back down. We are going to keep attacking. Knight takes d5. This opens up this discovered attack. And now, after pawn takes, queen takes g5, our position is quite active, but white can now pick up this pawn, forcing your king to move. And this leads to a completely crazy position. Like right now, this pawn is hanging, so let's say white castles, and you go bishop b7. We've already seen this idea before. We're going to line up against this pawn potentially. And strictly speaking, computer says that white is better because white is a pawn up. And again, strictly speaking, that is true. If your opponent is capable of playing perfect defensive moves over a long period of time, white's white should have a better game here. But also the line that computer suggests here is completely crazy and very hard to find for an ordinary chess player. And white's going to be really careful because a more natural move, something like pawn d3, trying to hit the queen, in fact, would just lose the game, because now knight f4, and all of a sudden white cannot stop queen from coming here to g2. Not only the knight supports it, but also the bishop from there. If I place pawn g3, there's another sudden checkmate, knight h3. Notice that the bishop takes away these squares, and the knight delivers a check. That is a checkmate. So again, strictly speaking, Stockfish says that white can defend here, but in a real practical game, it's always easier to attack, and statistics says that black is doing perfectly fine here. The opening video with the most common opening error that I mentioned previously is right here. You may click over there and watch it right now. The free masterclass that teaches you how to attack in any middle game position is over there. You may check it out right now, and hopefully talk to you soon. Take care.